Okay, I've started recording this event, and I don't know. Let's give it 30 more seconds. We'll get rolling. Again, anybody who's in right now, on your panel there's a Q&A tab, and if you go there, you can ask questions. If you're having trouble, if we lose audio, something strange happens during the events, don't be bashful jumping in. Okay, I think it's time to get started here. Number of attendees still climbing, which is great. Good morning or good afternoon if you're in Europe. This is Jim Quancy. I'm the Senior Director of the Autodesk Developer Network here at Autodesk. I'd like to thank you for joining us for this webinar today where it's an opportunity for people to take a step back and look at the industry as a whole. We all spend a lot of time day by day, dealing with specific customers, specific technical issues, looking at our particular corner of the overall design and engineering software industry. And sometimes it's good to just take a step back and see what's happening big picture, which long term does affect all of our businesses. Again, a little bit of housekeeping. Anytime during this presentation, you can go to the Q&A area, ask a question. A lot of the talking today will be done by Business Advantage, one of Autodesk's research partners. We'll be watching your questions, try to answer as we go. We'll also have an extensive Q&A at the end for as long as we need to answer all your questions. And with that, I want to introduce Business Advantage. Maybe some of you, we did a webinar maybe a year back with Business Advantage. Business Advantage is a research company, market research company based in the UK. Joining us today is Chris Turner, who's CEO and founder, and has 30 years of background in market research. We also have Nicola Mansfield, who's the Director of Market and Competitor Analysis at Business Advantage. And I bring you Business Advantage because Autodesk has a lot of experience. We use Business Advantage a lot. Over the last decade, Autodesk has had Business Advantage do over 200 research projects. And I'll tell you, they go from, low cost, quick, easy, $5,000 kind of research projects to, six-digit kind of research projects. These guys do all sizes of projects, quantitative research, qualitative, worldwide, and they've been really gracious to share with us some of the general CAD design engineering software market research they've been doing that I thought many of you would find valuable to see what's happening big picture. Because as I mentioned earlier, some of this big picture stuff long term absolutely affects all of our businesses. And with that, I'm going to pass things off to Chris to kind of get things rolling. Maybe Chris, I don't know if you're going to do a little more intro, something along those lines.
Well, thank you very much, Jim, and it's a real pleasure to be able to present this webinar, this material today. So please accept my welcome and thanks for investing your time in this opportunity. So as Jim's gracious introduction, our company's been established over 20 years now, and we've really have a broad specialization in the CAD, CAM, CAE, PDM, PLM space. And as Jim mentioned, we've done a lot of work with Autodesk. Most of our work is proprietary. It belongs to clients, and so it's not shared. But about once or twice a year, we do generally available research, and at the end of last year, very beginning of this, we carried out a CAD Trends survey, and I'll go on to introduce that, of course, in much more detail. Let me just say that this is publicly available, and I know Jim is recording this session and will make the recording available. but there is also more information on the Business Advantage website for a download of the slides with more information if you'd like. So today we're going to look at 10 of the most important trends and those that are of most interest, we believe, to the marketplace. And we're also going to look a little bit at a couple of other topics at hardware usage and trends moving forward with different types of hardware platforms. And also we're going to look at how people inform themselves about the CAD, CAM, CAE, PDM, PLM space, where they go to, and to enable them to learn more about their industry. So, Jim, next slide, please. So first of all, we're going to give a brief review of how we carried out the survey. The purpose, as you can see here, is future planning for business. And Jim's introduction focused on that, and that's the point of our survey and indeed the presentation we're making. So we did an online survey. We went out to literally thousands and thousands of people. We had responses from 55 different countries. We looked at the perceived importance, the actual and future usage of 14 key trends, technologies in and around the CAD/CAM space, both for now and over the next 5 years. The survey was managed from our offices in London and San Francisco, and the respondents were drawn from our own in-house data repository, where we have over 500,000 CAD decision makers and users, and we use this data. So we'll now look at the breakdown of the audience or respondents to the survey. Next slide, please, Jim. So if we look at the top left-hand corner of the screen at the moment, this breaks the audience down by geography. You can see that about 2/3 of those that responded come from EMEA, just slightly less than 1/6 from Asia Pacific, and just over 1/6 from the Americas. If we then turn our attention to the top right-hand side of the slide, we now look at the size of company, and no particular surprise here. The majority of the companies are small companies, up to 50 employees, and if you go to small, medium enterprises or small, medium businesses, you've got about 3/4, in fact, coming from that smaller segment. And then over 1,000 employees, the larger area, a smaller number from there, obviously. So if we go to the bottom of the slide, on the left-hand side, we see the respondent profile by job title. You can see quite clearly that the technical managers, the CAD engineering design, project managers, technical discipline, make up about 1/3 of the respondents. Another 1/3 are technical professionals, designers and engineers. And then you've got another 20% or so of managers. They break down to sort of 12% are executive managers, VPs and C-level executives, senior directors, and then we have about 8% that are coming from IT professionals, whether they be managers or just straight IT people. And then finally, the breakdown by segment. This is broken down in much more detail. This is just a brief summary for you, but you can see here that in the broader AEC space, we've got over 1/3, nearly 40% of respondents come from that area. Manufacturing, as one would expect, and process and plant. Next slide, please, Jim.
And I'm just going to note, Chris, if I'm trying to grow my software business in Europe, you've really got my attention. There's a lot of European feedback here and a lot of managers.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate the comment. So we're just about to go on and look at some key trends. We're going to look in overview of those trends and some initial analysis. Remember, we looked at awareness and usage, the importance of these particular trends. So we'll have a quick look at those, and then we'll go into detail on 10 of the most important trends coming from the survey. Next slide, please. So, in terms of the trends, based upon discussions and our own experience, we identified 14 key trends for the survey, and then carried out a three-phased approach, as you can see from this slide. First of all, we asked about familiarity or awareness of whether people have heard of these particular trends. Secondly, we asked about the importance of these trends to their core business functions. And lastly, we asked about the current and future usage. And from that, of course, that data, we're able to get a view of the current and future trends worldwide for the CAD space over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. This particular slide is a snapshot of the current trends and the company's awareness and usage of technologies and trends. The slide is ordered by adoption, and the adoption ratio was calculated. It's shown as usage shown as a proportion of awareness. Now, I'll give an example of that. If we look to the left-hand side of the chart at 3D modeling, we have 330 respondents aware of 3D modeling. We have 255 respondents using 3D modeling. So by using those two figures, we create an adoption ratio of 77% of those that are aware, that are using the technology. So we've split the graph broadly into two areas here. You can see by the dotted line. If we look to the left-hand side here, these are trends typically with above average adoption, where awareness translates to usage for these trends. And we've already touched the 3D solid modeling. Obviously, 77% of those that are aware of 3D modeling are actually using it. And you can see some of the different areas that we've looked at and people's awareness of those and their usage, and hence the adoption. If we turn to the right-hand side of the chart, these are trends with low adoption and where awareness alone is insufficient to drive usage of these trends. And you can see here that there's a very quite a high, two-thirds of people were aware of 3D printing, for example, but the number of people using 3D printing is much lower, and the same with Cloud Based CAD, over which there's a lot of material currently. So this gives us just a current trends snapshot of the awareness of technologies and their current usage. Next slide, please.
Chris, I'm curious, because some of these, like 3D modeling, I'm actually surprised the numbers are as high as they are, given there's a pretty heavy representation by AEC. So it seems to indicate there's quite a bit of 3D modeling going on in AEC, which is a more recent thing versus manufacturing, where they've been doing 3D modeling forever.
That's absolutely right, Jim. And we'll talk about 3D modeling in a bit more detail, but we found that that AEC has and manufacturing now have similar levels of use of 3D modeling technology. So there's been quite a dramatic shift over the last few years, and now it's very readily accepted in the AEC space.
Cool.
Okay, very good. So next, we're going to look at the usage against importance. And the usage is the vertical axis on the chart, and the importance is the horizontal axis. So if we start in the bottom left-hand quadrant, you can see that these are technologies or trends that currently have low usage, and relatively, people are saying low importance, they believe, to their business at this time. If we go to the bottom right-hand segment of the chart, you can see that there's lower usage here, but high importance. So they are increasing trends. People see these as areas that are going to be growing and increasingly important to them. And then in the top right-hand segment of the chart, we can see here that these are higher usage and higher importance. They're the current key trends. And again, 3D modeling is right out there on the top right-hand side. But also, if we come back a little lower down, for example, we've got simulation, which is an up-and-coming trend, you can see there. And also mobile access to CAD is growing, and the usage is beginning to grow as well. So this, again, just gives a quick snapshot of the usage and the importance to people. And we'll talk about these in more detail as we go through.
You know, the simulation one surprises me a bit, that it's the usage is as high as it is, and the importance. I always think of that as, you know, a lot of people are aware of it, but not that many people use it, but I guess I have that wrong.
Well, I think the market is changing quite rapidly. That, and again, we'll talk about this in more detail, but people are providing simulation tools in more general-based CAD packages. The costs of these tools is reducing, and so more and more people have the opportunity of using those. But we'll touch on that in more detail.
Now, I suspect some of that is once you have a 3D model, you can do simulation, something you couldn't do without a 3D model.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Next slide.
Yes, please. Okay, so here, this is where the growth is coming from in these trends over the next year and the next 5 years. And if we look at the chart, you've got the 3 lines, the current usage, additional usage in 1 year, and then over 5 years. And where there's a gap between the lines, i.e. between the current and the projected usage, and you can see that, for example, on the left-hand side of the screen with mobile access to CAD and a little bit around BIM. The broader the gap there, it's essentially showing that there's good growth opportunities. These are the most important trends as far as the growth is concerned and the opportunity. 3D printing, for example, less importance, and cloud-based CAD, but again, strong growth opportunity, and we'll look at that in more detail. Remember, that's comparing current usage, the anticipated usage in 12 months or by the beginning of 2015, and then over the next 3 to 5 years. The wider the gap between the lines, the greater the forecast growth.
So when you say that, Chris, so does that mean it's more likely if I go to talk to a customer and I mention 3D printing, they'll be happy to talk to me about it because they have interest, though they may not use it?
Absolutely. Very strong interest, high awareness of it. At the moment, people are not so, they're not kind of seeing how they might use it in their business. They don't see the importance of it necessarily. So your comment is a really good one. There's a great opportunity there to talk with people about 3D printing, what it means for their business, tools that are currently available, the reducing cost of these machines, and how it can be used to speed up design times, to create prototypes very quickly, models that people can decide whether it's a go or no-go much faster than previously, and at a reducing cost. So absolutely, there's a great conversation to be had around that. There's a great conversation to be had about CAD in the cloud and what opportunities there are for people with the flexibility and, again, potential reduction in costs. So, yeah, these are some great talking points as we meet with clients. Okay, next slide, please. So we've now had a kind of a general overview and looked at these things more together. We're now going to look at 10 of the topics, of the more interesting topics in more detail. And these, if you remember, we asked people about the importance to their core business functions. So we've ranked these 10 in order of importance that people have established today to their business. Next slide, please. The first is 3D modeling. And of those people that are aware of 3D modeling, asked to rate the importance to their business out of 10, it scored 7.5. And if we look at the chart, we can see that this is perceived to be the most important trend out of the 14. If we look at the use now in-house, 62% of people are using in-house. That grows within a year to be 68% of people. So there's an increase of 6 percentage points between 62 and 68, but those 6 points upon the base of 60-odd mean that there is a growth this year alone of 10%. Because it already has a relatively high penetration and usage, then the growth rate over the next 3 to 5 years is not so strong. It's some 14% over the period.
Chris, if somebody wanted it, do you have the cross tabulations, kind of what these numbers are for AEC versus manufacturing versus plant?
Yes, thank you, Jim. Yeah, we do, and it's something I'm going to touch on a bit later, but I'm glad you raised it now. So again, today we're just presenting the highlights. We can break down where the sample size is sufficient. We can break down all this data by the type of business, the size of business, their geography, the type of respondent, the software that they're using, the different hardware they use. So, within the analysis software, we can compare any variable with any others. So there are literally thousands, tens of thousands of permutations of ways of slicing and dicing the data.
And for the people listening in, to be transparent, I ask this question because for most of you, you really need more detailed information to have something that's actionable that you would base investments on. And one of the reasons we're having this webinar today is a lot of small businesses don't depend on real data to make decisions. It's based on what customers you talk to this month and what your sales folks are saying, and that's not to mean that's not important, but sometimes having real data, hard data is important, and Autodesk does a lot of this. And so, again, part of the reason we're doing the webinar is to encourage more of you to get some data behind your decision making. Oh, next slide, Chris.
No, I'd like to make some further comments on this, if I may, Jim. Thank you. So just to give you a feel, in terms of current usage, Germany as a country is leading with 81% of people using 3D modeling, the UK at 62% and the US at 59%. We touched on usage in AEC and manufacturing. Well, manufacturing leads as a sector, of course, with 70%, but in AEC, 66% of those people in AEC are currently using 3D modeling, and in process and plant, that's 64%. So there's not a huge difference between manufacturing, AEC, and process and plant now in the use of 3D modeling. The survey also shows that medium-sized companies are more likely to be involved in 3D modeling, 70% of those, small, 56%, and large, 62%. And at the moment, DASO and PTC users have the highest usage of 3D modeling with their tools. About 20% of people, and there's limited data here, I should say, so it's just an indication, but about 20% of people are saying that the high cost of some of these solutions as a reason for limited adoption. We asked people why they adopted, and we asked them why they haven't adopted. And when people looked at that, the high cost, but again, we have lower cost solutions coming on the market. We've got cloud-based offerings with flexible licensing options. And so we think that that projected growth rate will be very interested when we do the survey again in about 6 months' time, and we see what happened to that growth rate, whether it did accelerate this year and plans for the future or not. Next slide, please. The second most important trend coming from the survey was product data management. This scored 6.9 out of 10 in importance, although fewer people were aware or using PDM. But in terms of pure importance, it was ranked as number 2. Again, looking at the data again, we're showing 25% growth over the next 12 months and 44% growth over the next 3 to 5 years. from quite a low base, I would say. The Americas is leading in the use of PDM. 1 out of 5 CAD users in the Americas are likely to use, as compared with APAC and EMEA. But unsurprisingly, perhaps here, when we look at by country, PDM has a higher penetration in Germany, with 28% of people currently using tools in that area. Companies in the manufacturing sector and medium to large companies tend to be typical users, and in terms of usage by CAD brand, PTC users and Siemens, and followed by Dassault. Okay, next slide, please. The third trend is simulation, with an importance of 6.5 out of 10. Again, we can see here, perhaps a higher usage rate than many had expected. 28% currently use in-house, and again, growth here not super strong. We got 14% growth over the next 12 months and 25% growth over the next 3 to 5 years. But again, I think as lower cost options become available, and more tools are made available with 3D modeling software, then that usage may well increase. Germany is the leading country currently at 47% usage of simulation tools, followed by the US at 35%, and the UK down at only 22%. In terms of industries, again, kind of perhaps not surprising here, but manufacturing, process and plant are key users, 45% and 33% of people using. Medium and large companies, large-scale companies, tend to be more typical users of these particular technologies. Again, we asked about reason for a relatively low adoption, only 28% in use at the moment, and we've talked about some of those, but cost was a reason, and lack of user technical knowledge. The trend towards simulation tools being incorporated with CAD design tools is good, but fear in the market. There's a lack of expertise and understanding of how to use these tools and what the results are really going to be saying, and are mistakes going to be made. So again, lower cost tools becoming available will help, and cloud-based with flexible licensing, again, will help. But there is a real need here for education, for assistance in making full use of these tools. So I'm going to hand over to Nicola now, who's going to continue discussing some of the important trends that came out of the survey. Thank you, Nicola.
Yeah, Chris, before I lose you, I just said we need to have a beer one evening and talk about why the Germans use simulation 3 or 4 times higher rate than the Brits.
Okay. Yeah, well, happy to have a discussion with you. That's great, Jim. Yes, it is interesting, and we can dig into that in a bit more detail. Nicola's going to talk about more of the trends, and then I'll come back at the end and just do a bit of a summary on some of the information for you, looking at future growth particularly.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So next trend that we looked at was building information modeling, or BIM. And here the importance score was 6.4 out of 10, so it's still above average. And we asked about the awareness of BIM, and of the sample of 409 respondents, 165 were actually aware of the term BIM, and 1 in 5 of those were actually using BIM. Usage was highest in medium-sized companies, and for this survey that's companies between 50 and 999 employees, much more so than in the smaller companies. And the respondents clearly saw the benefits of using BIM, and the main things they mentioned were things like design improvement, that's almost 60%, savings on design time, cost, as well as faster response times to market. We expect to see high growth in this area. In the next 12 months, we're predicting 35% growth, and then in the next 3 to 5 years, it's as much as 60% growth. There's a high usage of BIM in the UK, more so than in the US. I think in the UK, about 26%, and the US, about 16% amongst our sample. And interesting, the slightly lower adoption in the German market, which is unlike some of the other trends that we've seen. There's a real opportunity, particularly in the UK market. Some of you may be aware that the UK government outlined an ambition to achieve BIM Level 2, and that's for all the central government construction projects that are taking place before 2016. And our results really showed that the government sector is likely to fuel further growth in that area over the next 5 years. What might also be of interest for Autodesk is amongst our sample, those who are using BIM currently are more likely to be using Autodesk products. Moving on to the next trend, we looked at product lifecycle management, or PLM, and here the importance score was 6.2 out of 10, slightly lower. Current usage is highest in the Americas, more so than EMEA. Americas is about 24% and EMEA about 11%. And not unexpectedly, within the larger companies where PLM is being used. We can see there's still work to do to educate the market about PLM, and only 128 people out of the 409 were even aware of the term PLM. And not surprisingly, it was more prevalent in the manufacturing sector. There are clearly perceived benefits that were mentioned, things like savings on design time, that was almost half of respondents mentioned that, on cost, and also things like design improvements, and again, that was 48%, almost half of the people aware of PLM. We expect to see growth in this sector about 23% over the next 12 months, and about 61% over the next 3 to 5 years, so there's opportunity there. Amongst our sample, over the next 12 months, we saw the highest growth potential, actually, for Siemens users. They were most interested in adoption in the next few months. And there was also an indication that processing and plant was a sector where there's more likelihood to adopt PLM in the next 12 months. Might be of interest that actually of those using PLM, the most frequently mentioned amongst our sample, they were using Windchill from PTC.
Oh, Nicola, if you want to get a chuckle, I don't know how many people know this. PTC is actually a member of the Autodesk Developer Network. So, and that's because we want to make it really easy for customers who want to use Autodesk products, whether it's AutoCAD or Inventor or Fusion or whatever. It's very easy to use that product in a Windchill PLM environment. But it is pretty funny when my folks are supporting PTC.
Okay, and then the next trend was concurrent engineering, and we actually provided a definition just so it's clear what we were talking about here. And we referred to it as multiple users working on a single model in real time. Now, this achieved an important score of 5.9 out of 10. And 130 people were aware of this term, concurrent engineering. Only 12% were actually currently using this sort of solution. And typically these were the larger companies, it's about 19%. The smaller companies, only 9% were using it. And typically the larger companies, where over 1,000 employees, were more likely to be using it. And that's 1 in 5 at the moment. We expect quite significant growth here. There's 90% growth expected over the next 3 to 5 years, so more longer term. But actually over the next 12 months, it's looking like 33% growth. America is the leading market, and it has the highest usage at the moment with 16%. Also, we asked a slightly related question to concurrent engineering. We asked about the need to collaborate as part of the survey. We also asked about collaboration tools. And actually, over half the market either don't use or not aware of collaboration software. So we felt there was a real opportunity there. We've also recently completed some work for Autodesk looking at a new collaboration tool. That also identifies that there's an opportunity there. There is, however, a problem with understanding of what collaboration tools really are, and there's a real need to educate the market. The next area we looked at was mobile access to CAD, and this had an important score of 5.8 out of 10. And just to be clear, when we're talking about mobile access to CAD, it's the use of tablets and mobile phones to access applications. What we found was 21% are currently using CAD or mobile applications, and it was CAD managers that were more likely to be using CAD applications via a mobile device, more so than designers or engineers. About a quarter in the AEC sector access CAD using a mobile device. We've actually completed a recent study, again, for Autodesk, where we've shown that actually it's the architecture and engineering sector as part of AEC rather than construction that's really using these mobile devices to access CAD applications. A quarter in the UK and 1 in 5 in the US are currently using a mobile device to access CAD. We'll see a high growth for this area over the next 12 months in the APAC region, which may be of interest. That's about 18%. There's a lot of potential opportunity for growth over the next 12 months, with about 48% growth forecasted. And over the next 3 to 5 years, we're looking at as much as 67% growth. Another area we looked at was big data applications. And there's a lot of talk about this in the press, but there really was quite a lack of awareness in the CAD sector. There's really a lack of understanding of what it really is, and there's definitely a need for more education on the benefits of big data applications to the market. I should point out that we had quite small sample sizes because of the lack of awareness of what big data applications were. But of those that were aware of it, 45% mentioned that being faster to market was a key benefit of using big data applications. But it was interesting, over half of the people who had actually heard of big data couldn't actually describe what it is. In terms of growth, we're predicting 33% over the next 12 months, and over 3 to 5 years, that's increasing to 67% growth. And again, in Germany, it's interesting, at the moment, it's twice as likely to be using big data than any of the other markets. In terms of regions, APAC is an area of interest, about 5%, currently using big data applications, followed by the Americas at 4%, and EMEA represents about 3%. For the next 12 months, usage in the government sector is likely to pick up, and we're suggesting it's going to grow from 4% to 8%. We also asked what they're actually using big data for, and about 41% are using big data applications, and 32% are using big data for storage. It's not really being used for analytics at the moment, it's more storage and use for applications. The next area is 3D printing, and as Chris mentioned, this is quite an interesting area. The importance score here was very low, it's 3.9 out of 10. But 2/3 of participants were actually aware of what 3D printing is, but brand awareness, interestingly, is not at all high in relation to 3D printing. What we found was the most frequently mentioned 3D printing solution was from Stratasys. There's definitely a lot of opportunity there as brand awareness is very low, and obviously with the recent press releases from Autodesk about the introduction of 3D printers, there's a clear opportunity there. The highest usage for 3D printing is actually in Americas, and particularly in the large organizations. And some of the benefits that our respondents mentioned were things like kind of design improvements, 63%, savings on design time, and cost as well, again, faster time to market. We expect growth in this area in the next 12 months to be about 50%, and it increases significantly over the next 3 to 5 years to 128%. Again, you might be interested to know that amongst our sample, PTC and Siemens customers are currently more likely to be using 3D printing solutions. The last area we covered was Cloud Based CAD. And again, this had quite a low importance rating, it's 3.7 out of 10. But it does show one of the highest growth areas compared to other trends, 128% growth over the next 12 months and 257% over the next 3 to 5 years. Currently usage is slightly higher in the AEC sector and amongst the larger companies, which represents about 11%. The APAC region is showing higher growth potential compared to other regions, and Americas more so than EMEA. And some of the benefits that were mentioned in relation to cloud-based CAD, we've seen this higher mobility, 76% mentioned that, increased storage capacity, and ease updating software and cost reduction. There are, however, a number of concerns over security of cloud computing, and this is coming up frequently in many of the projects that we've completed with both Autodesk and many of our other clients. And these concerns really need to be addressed by vendors offering cloud-based solutions. It's certainly an area that we would suggest represents significant growth.
Yeah, I think what I'd note, here at Autodesk, our desktop sales have been growing 2, 3, 4% a year for the last 2 years. Our cloud business, our mobile cloud business, has been growing over 20% a year for the last 3 years. So we definitely see this.
Okay, so I'll head back to Chris now.
Thanks, Nicola. Very good. Appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you, Jim. So just the final stage here, 2 other areas we're going to look at quickly, and then finally we'll look at 14 trends that we looked at by growth, showing the greatest opportunities in growth in the market. So if we turn our attention to hardware, next slide please, Jim. So on this slide, we ask people what hardware is being used and what will be used next. And again, unsurprisingly, I think we're seeing a decline in demand for desk-based solutions, particularly in the Americas, which is adopting more mobile working platforms. But there is increased demand for mobile solutions across all regions, and particularly in the AEC sector. So currently, if we look at the traditional platform, the desktop workstations, the penetration of those is highest in Germany. I guess more precision work, but 64% of those are using desktop workstations. Desktop PCs are highest in the UK at 56% and lowest in Germany at 31%. CAD managers, for example, at 61% are more likely to use desktop workstations, and more senior level managers use desktop PCs, I guess less intense working, computational work, and laptop PCs are common among engineers. The higher usage of tablets in APAC is at 12%. But looking to the future, mobile access to CAD obviously leads the future, and it's been true to say, though, that expected growth has not been as predicted several years ago. But if you look at tablets, for example, the growth here is 6 to 17%. It's almost 3 times over the period that we've asked you to look at, the 3 to 5 year horizon. So in future, mobile phones and tablets will be used more in the US than any other country. They'll also be more popular amongst CAD managers, tablets, and mobile workstations. But looking at the mobile phone platform, or the cell phone, the interest in that remains relatively low. But tablets, as we've touched on already, is growing. Next slide, please.
Just an interesting observation, here in the Bay Area, when it comes to technology, we tend to be leading. When you go to a large construction project these days, everybody's got a tablet. I mean, the plumber, the electrician, the laborer, the guy doing the foundation work, and that was not true 2 or 3 years ago.
Absolutely.
So it's been pretty dramatic here in Northern California.
Yes. Yeah, that's very much borne out by recent work we've been doing with Autodesk, with research on construction sites and in design offices in California, actually, in and around the San Francisco area, and also Sacramento, I think. So yeah, absolutely, Jim, absolutely. Okay, so we find this a very interesting area, the information. So where the users, influencers, and decision makers go in order to inform themselves around CAD technology, to keep themselves up to date with developments in the CAD industry. So we've ranked the order of mentions, and you can see here quite clearly the sources of information that are most popularly mentioned: the internet search engines, industry magazines and journals, etc., etc. And again, this has come out from other surveys, many other surveys we've done, but the higher usage in America is of online sources in EMEA, for example, And while in EMEA, people, particularly in some countries, like more traditional print media, so brochures, for example, are used in EMEA rather than the Americas and Asia Pacific. Again, we found white papers which have become very popular, sort of ubiquitous, if you will, in so many areas. The source of information there is 17% in terms of the mentions, but again, the higher usage of these in the Americas rather than EMEA. So, a movement there towards content marketing. The results of this are very similar to other surveys that we've done in the industry for clients over time. And as we touched on earlier, this information on this slide and all the other slides is just an overview. We are able to break down data by region, country, in some instances by country, but by region certainly, size of organization, industry, software usage, etc., etc. And benefits of using different technologies, for example, we can look at those in more detail and break those down, and what they hope to achieve by using the technologies.
And I'm going to point out to folks, and for the people on the line who are software developers, it's probably no surprise, but maybe for the business people, note online blogs, CAD forums, and other forums are above talking to a sales rep, are above a product brochure, are above a trade show. So for those of you who are out there trying to build your business, if you're not doing a blog or a forum, you really should be. That is one of the top ways to engage new customers these days.
Yes, thank you, Jim. A very good comment.
Next slide.
Please. So this is a summary of the forecast growth and thus the opportunities coming from these trends and technologies. And you can see here very clearly those that the growth over the next 12 months and the growth over the next 3 to 5 years, and they're ranked in order of the growth rate over the next 12 months. So we'll just look at the top 3 briefly and the last one. So the top 3, Cloud Based CAD. EMEA is expected to double its usage over the next 12 months, while APAC shows the highest growth over 12 months at 171%, albeit from a low base. And over the next 3 to 5 years, both APAC and the Americas are expected to grow by 328%. There's a huge growth there from a relatively small base, though. Smaller companies, remember these are the 0 to 50 employees, they show the highest growth potential with 183% growth over the next 12 months and 383% growth over the next 3 to 5 years. There is slower adoption forecast amongst medium to large companies, possibly due to concerns over data security, that come hand in hand with cloud usage. So the second trend here, pay-as-you-go. So high growth expected in Germany, likely to double in usage over the next 12 months. Very low usage in APAC and both now and over the next 12 months, although there are some indications of growth in 3 to 5 years. But very high growth overall in this pay-as-you-go access to CAD software. And then 3D printing, which we've talked about a fair bit today already, but it's over the next 12 months, the growth, I mean, it's relatively slow compared with cloud-based CAD and pay-as-you-go software at only 50%. But long term, there's high growth there, 128%. Long term, looking at by countries, over 3 to 5 years, the UK, 182% growth, Germany, 70%, and the US is only 38%, but do bear in mind that there's a higher penetration currently of 3D printer usage in the U.S. market. And again, looking at by software brand, Dassault users are likely to drive greater usage. Currently, they're predicting, those particular users are predicting 42% growth in 12 months and 74% growth in 3 to 5 years. And of all the trends we've talked about, if you remember the highest, of the trends that we talked about, the highest usage and one of the highest important, the most important trends was 3D modeling. But the growth in 3D modeling over the next year and over the next 3 to 5 years is actually one of the is the lowest growth rate that we have shown on this particular chart. So, very good.
Chris, you know, to some degree, the slow growth in 3D modeling is because it's already highly penetrated.
Exactly, absolutely. Very, you know, high penetration and high importance. And so, yes, there are people that plan to adopt 3D modeling, and we talked about some of the constraints to growth there. And you know, cost was one area that came up, and with more flexible licensing and some lower cost solutions, perhaps that have come into the market and continue to come into the market, that might increase the adoption, but not compared with some of the newer cloud-based CAD or 3D printing, for example, the growth rate, the future growth of 3D modeling is quite slow when you compare it with these other newer technologies.
You'll chuckle. We get a discount for buying MakerBots here at Autodesk, so I can get a MakerBot Replicator 2 for about $2,000, and I'm kind of, it's a time for me to play.
Seems to be.
I mean, I can buy a reasonably good 3D printer for not much more than, for less than the cost of buying like a MacBook Air.
Okay. Well, as we say, it's coming down in cost all the time. So, Jim, maybe just go to the last slide for a moment. Just like to hand it back to you in a moment, Jim. But on behalf of Nicola and myself, we'd like to thank Autodesk for hosting this webinar and inviting us to participate. We appreciate the opportunity. We really hope that it's been informative for you and will help in developing your thinking and plans both for the remainder of this year and beyond, of course. We'll now hand back to Jim, and if there are questions and answers session we're scheduled here, and we trust that Nicola and I would be able to assist you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Nicola, for presenting. And so Q&A is open. Again, you can go to the Q&A text area. I'm sitting here browsing it, asking questions. We'll probably answer live in person if we can. I've got a question here. What is meant by advanced real-time rendering? Was that in your survey, Chris?
We presented 10 trends today. There were 14 trends overall, and we did touch on rendering. I don't have the actual definition we used at the time. Nicola, do you have to hand, or would you be able to comment on that?
Well, the definition we used was advanced real-time rendering and visualization. We didn't specifically define that within the questionnaire.
That's okay. So, other questions? We've got about 40 people on the line right now. Don't be bashful. Now, if you actually called in by phone, if you hit *6, you'll be unmuted, and you could ask in person without typing. Don't be bashful. This is a good time to ask your personal question. And don't forget, if after this you've got questions. One of the reasons I had Business Advantage talk to you is so you know who they are, you know the people there. You can always reach out to them with specific questions you may have. They have a lot more detailed information from the survey, or you may even want to talk to them about doing a very specific survey for the specific industry you may be doing business in, which I'm sure they would be glad to help with.
Yes, thanks.
I got a question here. Do you know of any special reason why BIM penetration is slower in Central Europe? I can tell you what we think at Autodesk. We think at Autodesk there are a lot of long-term industry standards around drawings. The deliverables is very frequently drawings. And it's only been relatively recently that at Autodesk, Revit has been able to do a really good job meeting the drawing specifications versus other parts of the world where the drawing requirements are not quite as strict. So BIM was adopted in a much faster, quicker way.
Yeah, Jim, I don't think we have anything to add on that. We'd have to look at the sample size that came in from Central Europe and then that specific area to see if there's any sensible data. But I don't think either Nicola and I would have that off the top of our head. Can I just say that in a previous webinar, and you've already touched upon it, Jim, that this is a general analysis. If people do have specific questions that requires just a little bit of work, we can, maybe we can provide a little bit of custom analysis at no cost. If people want more, a lot more detail in a particular area, then that would be a chargeable service. But we're happy to obviously to field people's requests and make them aware of what we're able to do for them if that's appropriate.
I've got another good question here, Chris. So we saw all these growth rates. Was that seats, users, revenue?
Again, Nicola, can you help with the precise question there? I can't remember what we asked for.
I would guess most of this has to do with users because it's how a specific user responded.
It is users, I think. We didn't refer to number of seats or the revenue. It would be users.
Would be users. Okay, great. What do we got a question here? Regarding the slide about hardware usage, did you also gather data about OS, operating system usage?
I don't think we did, no. We have another data set which is more extensive. It's only for the UK market, but we have information on 100,000 CAD users in the UK market and the operating systems that they use. So we don't have it for this, but if the person that asked that question is interested, we can only provide it for the UK market, but if they're interested, we could do a very simple analysis for you in terms of the operating systems that are used in the CAD/CAM space.
I've got another question here about using cloud computing and people's fears related to losing their data. I've got an Autodesk point of view on that, but do you have any perspective on that, Chris?
Sorry, Jim, there's concern about losing the data.
Yeah, losing data that's up on the cloud. And when the person who asked the question, I don't know if losing it means I can't get it anymore, or losing it means, it ended up in public someplace where it didn't belong and my competitors can get access to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, not from this, but from other surveys. And Nicola, please chip in here if you'd like. But in other surveys, that is a concern. I think people, I know there's been some work recently in looking in Europe and the concerns over that, people would want servers that were hosting services to be based in Europe. They wouldn't want their data to go outside of Europe. They would want it to comply with European laws, regulations, et cetera, So, there is concern there, absolutely, that other people would have access or the data would end up somewhere else in a different area, geographical area that might not have the same kind of standards that are expected. So, there is concern there, but we've done quite a bit of work in this area. Nicola, any further comments on that?
One of the main things that was mentioned in a number of studies that we've done in relation to cloud-based solutions is what happens to data if they stop using a particular version, the ownership of the data, and whether they can access it if they no longer use a particular solution and move to another one. So what they're really looking for is reassurance that they actually own the data, will have rights to it long term, and can access it if they choose to move to an alternative CAD solution.
Yeah. And the Autodesk perspective on this is we have 7 full-time employees whose whole job is security. We find with most customers when we ask them, well, what do you do for security today in-house? Are your systems connected to the internet? And let's walk through what you do, and then we show you what we do. And most of the time, the customer walks away going, wow, my data is a whole lot safer with Autodesk than it is in our own business. And the answer is, in most cases, it is. The other thing at Autodesk, we have data centers. Our primary data center today is in the United States. We are opening up a data center in Europe early next year. And we're going back and forth with suppliers. We're not too sure yet. It's going to be in Ireland, the UK, Belgium, or the Netherlands. So we are going to give customers in Europe the ability to say, hey, I want my data within the EU where it's protected by EU security and privacy laws and things of that sort. So, we're being sensitive to that. We're also going to be opening a data center in Asia, again, for similar reasons, to make the customers feel better about the data. When it comes to the maintaining of data, Autodesk.com, I think it's called Trust Center, spells out exactly, what we do in terms of, people, for example, stop paying their service, their data, continues to reside with Autodesk for a period of, I think, 30 days. We send several warnings, and I think if we hear nothing for another 30 days after that, we still continue to hang on to the data. But now it's like 60 days out. And yeah, at that point, we may do away with the data. And then there is the other side of it where the customer wants to get rid of their data that they've been maintaining on the cloud, which, again, if you look on Autodesk.com, we spell out the details and, what you can do and how you do it. And, so, kind of net, the answer to this question is educating the customer. And this is a hard thing. People are very sensitive. It's in the news all the time. None of our customers want to end up on the front page of the news, and neither does Autodesk. Okay. I'm looking at some more questions here. There's a question about slow adoption of BIM in some countries and how that survey data is being used by Autodesk. That's a longer story. We absolutely use it. We have, we add more. We've been, for example, Central Europe, we've been investing heavily in the BIM side around industry development, business development, education, working with industry groups, seeing that, BIM adoption in Central Europe's been a bit slow. In Southern Europe, it's even worse, but I think some of that has to do with, the state of their economies, which has made it hard for a lot of those customers to make the investments to make the transition from a drawing 2D-based design environment to a 3D modeling BIM-based environment. What's this? Question, what is the typical size of your survey samples? Or what's your typical sample size?
Well, yeah, that's, it's a good question. It's a difficult one to answer. So let me just go through, a little bit of information about sample sizes. This particular sample size is about 400, over 400 responses, which is good to break down in up to 8 blocks, if you will, or segments. The analysis works quite well there. We really look at 50 as a minimum for an analysis or a quant-based analysis of data. sort of margins of error on 50 interviews are, they're quite wide. So we always sit down with our clients and say, well, how are you going to use the data? What's it for? Do you want an indication from a market, or do you want to say, plus or minus 3%, this is the situation? So we construct a sample size and indeed the whole project around what is the client trying to achieve for their business. And we construct the project and the sample size based around that. But it can, different needs, different sample size. Does that help on that topic? Nicola, I don't know if you have anything to add you'd like to comment on?
Not really. I think you covered it, Chris, but obviously, yes, it can go from 50, but it can go up to many, many thousands.
Yeah, and you do both quantitative and qualitative, so you may do qualitative studies that may only have 20 people?
Absolutely. So we offer a full range of qualitative work. So we've run focus groups for Autodesk, for example, in-person focus groups with sort of 6, 8, maybe 10 people in Europe and in the U.S. We run online focus groups where you might have 8 to 10 people participate. So you can have very small groups, or with qualitative work you might have one-to-one in-depth interviews. We ran for Autodesk again 120 video interviews in 12 different countries all over the world. English was not one of the languages used, and some of these video interviews were up to an hour long, where we were capturing data. So again, we come back. What is it that is our client trying to achieve? What purpose is the research? How is it going to help their business? What business problem are they trying to overcome or challenge, or to develop growth for the business, for example? And we then construct a program of research, consulting that will enable us to assist the client to achieve their objectives. And that might be qualitative work, it might be some quant work, it might be some analysis, it might be some consulting. We package it all together to provide a solution to the client's need.
I had another question here about customer satisfaction type surveys. So like somebody who's running a small business, are my customers really happy with me or not?
That's a great question, and yeah, absolutely. So we do customer satisfaction work. We typically, once we engage with a client, we do it on a regular basis for them, so typically annually, but sometimes more frequently. And we've done work for Autodesk in specific markets, again, in that area, looking at satisfaction with particular solutions or the offerings that Autodesk have. Another thing we've done for clients, and some of the people that are attending the webinar might be interested in this. We've done this work for Autodesk and other clients where we've done competitor customer satisfaction, where we've gone out and found your competitors' customers, and then as an independent research company, we've asked them to evaluate their experience of using the competitors' solutions. And you get a lot of really good data back from that, the weaknesses, what people would hope to have, et cetera, et cetera. Great platform for making approaches to competitor customers. So again, a full range of work around research for customer satisfaction. We run workshops for clients in terms of what the data really means. We look inside the company and internally as to how we can help to increase customer satisfaction. The process, the workflow through a company, you look at it as a chain, if you will, and it's only as strong as the weakest link. So we help identify the weaker links and help our clients to take some measures to improve and strengthen that, and to drive growth with the existing customers through increasing satisfaction. And once we acquire new customers, to retain those customers. We do work around the lifetime value of customers and work out what it is when someone walks through the door and becomes a customer, how much revenue are they and profit are they going to produce over the next 2, 5, 10, 15 years perhaps. So there's a lot of work around that, but from a simple survey through to really helping a business to drive growth, retain customers, increase profitability.
Okay, and with that, I'm going to wrap it up here. So, Chris, Nicola, I really appreciate your presenting to our audience here. We have 28 people hanging in there right to the end here through the full Q&A. And I want to encourage, everybody on the line here to make sure, as you're figuring out where to invest in your business, that you have a component of that research that is data-driven. That's not just, anecdotal, or not just looking at what may be a narrow area. Really look at using data to help, guide your investments, because it's just the right thing to do. It should be part of your R&D, your market development investment budget, especially when it comes to long term, when you're talking about where you want to take your business over several years. Chris, you want to say anything before we close out?
Well, just again, Jim, I really appreciate the opportunity of participating. Thank you for hosting it, and thank everyone for the investment of their time. We really hope that it's been useful for you. And again, if there are individual discussions that people would like to have, please contact us via the website. We'd be delighted to talk with you as to how we might be able to assist with more information from this survey or in other areas. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, folks. Have a great day or evening.
Thank you. Bye.